We are well aware of the numerous objections that can and have been raised about the futility of long-term citizen activism for multilateral structural change. We acknowledge what English philosopher David Hume referred to as the natural depravity of mankind, by which he meant that nothing is more certain than that men are, in a great measure, governed by interest, and that even when they extend their concern beyond themselves, 'tis not to any great distance, nor is it usual for them, in common life, to look farther than their nearest friends and acquaintance. We acknowledge the insight of public choice theory, where political outcomes conflict with the preferences of the public, because for a small investment, special interests can secure immense benefits that are immediate and direct, while the cost to the taxpayer is diffused and costly to prevent. We acknowledge that 3/5 of the electorate is understood by political strategists as low-information voters. 75 million Americans who rely on talk radio and less than factual hearsay from friends and family members to shape their political decisions, seemingly verifying author Ferdinand Lundberg's opinion that not all people are really interested in government, because many don't understand it at all. Some are incapable of understanding it. Others, although capable, just don't want to bother themselves with it. And we acknowledge that most people, when given the choice between the comfort of the status quo and truth, will choose to remain in comfort. Nevertheless, although we concede all of this, we also know, as Congressional Representative Ron Paul has said, that it is the energy in a small group of people that really leads nations. We know, too, as Nobel historian Will Durant has written, that civilization is the precarious labor and luxury of a minority. And we suspect that now may be the time when the energy of a small minority of Americans may usher in an American Renaissance. Now may be the time when a small minority of Americans is the spark that restores the American dream. And now may finally be the time when a small minority of Americans can convincingly persuade their fellow citizens to accept truth, because the comfort of the status quo is becoming ever less comfortable.
There's a Roman maximum in law that says, "For he that would be deceived, let him." Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business, that's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what the words mean, especially in relation to law and government, because there is a world of occultism that is operating today in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all. Understanding law and the words of law, there are two things that this planet has: water and earth, water and land. Consequently, there are two kinds of law: the law of the land and the law of water. You need to understand the difference. The law of the land is the law of the culture that lives on the land. And so consequently, the law of the land is different in every country. You can do things in America you can't do in Russia. However, there is a higher law that dominates the entire world. It's called the law of the water. The law of water is referred to as the law of money. It doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from, or where you live. Money is money. And anytime you're doing banking or using money, you are now under the law of water, maritime admiralty. If you go back in history where all of this began, back in the land of Canaan, and you probably have heard in the Bible the land of Canaan. The Canaanites were Phoenician bloodline, and in the ancient Phoenician language, Cana meant merchant, banker. The very word merchant comes from mer, M-E-R, for the sea, for water. As a mermaid, we have merchant. Merchant, bankers. Let me give an example of the difference between the law of water and the law of the land. The Statue of Liberty. must be put in water. It could not be put on American land as such. It had to be put in the harbor because it's not the statue of freedom. It's a statue of liberty. Liberty is what a sailor gets when he pulls into port on a ship. He gets liberty. He's not free. So America is not the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're not free or brave, period. And make no mistake, they do not pick words by chance. These words are very serious. Now let me give you an example of how this law of the water works. Why is it that you have to go to court? You go to court because you play basketball and tennis on a court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Why? Because that's what it is. It's a racket. When you go into a court, what's the idea of going to court? It's a game, like basketball. The whole idea in a court, one team gets up and they throw the ball over to that team of lawyers. That team gets up and throws the ball back into their court. And the judge is wearing a black robe, so he is the referee. He doesn't care which side wins or loses because he's going to get paid anyway. So he couldn't care less. The judge is a referee between two teams. The judge rules from the bench. The word bench in Latin is a bank. Therefore, the judge rules for the bank. Where do you find banks? You find banks on both sides of a river. They're called river banks. And what does a river bank do? It directs the flow of the currency. Consequently, your money is currency because it's the flow, the cash flow. I'll give you an example of how this works. When a ship pulls into a harbor, all ships are referred to as female. Why? There's a very good reason. Maritime Admiralty banking law says all ships are female because they're carrying items for money, and so consequently they are under Maritime Admiralty law. Admiralty is where we get the word admiral, admiral of the Navy. Let me give you an example of how this works. When a ship pulls into harbor, it parks at the dock. The captain has to provide for the port authorities a certificate of manifest because yesterday the ship was not here. But this morning the ship pulled in, so it has manifested. So consequently all the products have manifested. So each one of those items coming off of that ship has come off of water. And consequently on a ship, all ships have a captain. The word captain comes from a Latin word capital, money. So the captain represents the money that's on board the ship. And as I said, the captain has to present to the port authorities a certificate of manifest for each and every item. How much does it weigh? What color is it? How many doors does it have? Etc. The ship is sitting in its berth. Wherever a ship sits when it docks is called its berth, berthing a ship. All the items, as I said, coming off that ship represent money. They came in on water. They are Maritime Admiralty products. Now, when you were born, your mother's water broke. And when your mother's water broke, you came out. And this is why you have to have a birth certificate. Because you are a Maritime Admiralty product under international law. Your mother delivered you. This is why if you go to Sears and buy a refrigerator, they will ship it to you. They will deliver it. And that's why you were in your delivery room. Your mother was delivering a product. Maritime Admiralty. You came down your mother's birth canal. And once you, and as you're taking one of the televisions or the cars off the ship and it falls down and breaks, that's all right. Sometimes they're stillborn, so consequently you've lost money on that one. Therefore you have to have a death certificate, and it's always signed by the dock. The dock has to sign your birth certificate and your death certificate. All of these words and terms are Maritime Admiralty banking words. And therefore, if you understand, lawyers and judges and courts and government are all under international Maritime Admiralty law. All religions, all churches in the world operate under maritime law. This is why all churches are divided into denominations, like 20s and 50s and 100s. This is why they're called denominations, because all churches are nothing more than the product of maritime admiralty banking. It's an extraordinary story of occult treason, high treason, and crimes against the state. Make no mistake about it. The concept of human, spiritual, intellectual, and physical freedom never, ever existed on the earth. Think about this. When cowboys in Indian movies, when the cowboys would ride into town, they were wearing guns. How come they could walk into a bar carrying guns? And if two guys got in an argument, they could go out on the street and draw on each other in front of the sheriff's office, and the sheriff would do nothing. The reason why is because before 1868, all Americans were considered sovereigns. In 1868, there was a corporation founded. They referred to it as the United States Corporation. And they stipulated that anybody who would be a member of that corporation or work for that corporation would be called not an employee, but a citizen. So today, if you are asked, are you a citizen of the United States? What you think you're being asked is, are you lawfully in this country to do business? They didn't ask you if you were in America lawfully. They ask you a specific question. Are you, of your own volition, out of your own mouth, testifying that you are a citizen of the United States? Because in that way, citizen of the United States means you are an employee of a foreign corporation operating on international maritime law. So today, the President of the United States is the President of a privately owned company. The company is called United States. And the word president is always a word that is used in corporate law. Banks have presidents. All companies have presidents. So there's a corporation called United States, privately owned, and it has a president. Privately owned, out of England. And you need to understand words and terms, because I believe that there is a divine presence in the universe that men call God, and one day that divine presence is going to move on the earth, and we're going to see freedom come back to this world. And when it does, you're going to need to understand words and terms and how they have been used to trick you.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Whenever the legislators endeavored to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.